Hello again, welcome to another edition of Shed Talk, my weekly magazine video series looking at the keeping, breeding and showing of caged birds, with a special focus of course on the exhibition Budgerigar. Well, in this episode, following a request from one of our regular viewers who made a comment on one of the videos saying, like to see a look at the shed, so a shed tour. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We'll take a quick look around the Budgerigar shed. We'll look at the size, dimensions, the various cages and flights I have in here, and then we'll pop out and have a look at the Finch and Fife shed outside and do the same thing out there. And if we have time at the end of the episode, what I'd like to do is get the 4 birds that I'm planning to take to Oxford 1910 out of the flight, put them in some show cages, have a quick look at them, and then I will, following that, I'll prepare them and get them ready for the show. The show is actually on the same day as this video goes out. So that's what we'll look at in this particular episode. As always, if you enjoy the videos, then do hit the like button, and of course please do comment, or any comments on the video, and of course you can also comment and participate over on the Shed Talk Facebook page. If you're not a member, then pop over there and join that. Don't forget, if you're not one of our regular subscribers, then do hit the subscribe button, and if you want early notifications of when the videos are released, then of course hit the bell icon. So what we'll do is we'll start off by looking at the Budgerigar shed and have a tour around here. Well, I think I've said it before, the main Budgerigar shed is actually just a garage that's attached to the main house that I'm using, and I use about just over 2/3 of the garage. The garage is about 5¼ meters in length, and then about 2½ meters in width, and it's obviously the normal height of the garage, so I don't know, what, 7 foot tall, I suppose, so two and a bit meters tall. So that's the main shed. I'm running along the back wall of the shed, so the opposite end, I suppose, to the where the entrance to the garage would be. I have 2 of the main flights, and these 2 main flights are the main Budgerigar flight, which is the one that's directly behind me that you can see now, and then I have a smaller nappy flight for keeping the young birds in whilst they carry out their first molt, just not so they don't have to have the hustle and bustle of the main flight straight away. So the main flight is 2 meters high, by about 1½ meters long, by about ½ meter in depth. So that's the main flight. It has perches at either end of it, so it gives them flying space in between. They're the normal type of perches that most people use, the bank of perches, step type, I suppose they might be called. Perches at either end. At one end, these go from the ground of the flight right the way up to the top, and at the other end, which is I suppose you might say that end is almost a half flight, it has some storage underneath it, so it doesn't run the full from the ground upwards, as a storage at the bottom, like I say, and then perches on top of that. So those are the main perching areas. And on the floor of the main flight, and also on the I suppose a little half flight bit extension at the end, I use gold chip bedding. I've always used that, so that's my main reason for using it. I don't have a particular problem with it. It turns up very quickly when I order it, so as long as those things are happening, I will continue to use it. So that's it what I use as the floor covering. In terms of feeding and watering, the drinkers that I'm currently using are the Flowmatic type drinkers, and they are housed at one end of the flight, the end that I suppose the half flight end of the main flight. They're both there. My plan though is to move over to the reservoir drinker system that I think I showed in another episode. It used to be down in the where I used to have the main Budgerigar flight outside. I've moved part of that down here. I've just got to move the I suppose the nipple side of that down here, and then I will begin to use that. When I put that back on though, I will spend a little while with both systems running together, just so those birds that aren't used to it or have forgotten how to use it will learn how to use it. In all honesty, when I first started using it down the other end, it was instantly they knew what to do. I think the inquisitive style of the Budgerigar means that they'll start to peck at the nipple end, and they'll discover that water comes out when they do, and they start using it. Anyway, that's the drinkers. In terms of feeding, I feed at the bottom of the flight, in between the two sets of perches, so they doesn't get fouled by the birds perching. And the reason why I feed at the bottom is solely so that it means that the birds go down there to feed and then they have to fly back up, so it gives them a bit of exercise, I suppose. That's the reason why I feed at the bottom or on the ground. I feed using a number of dishes. They're shallow dishes that I put the seed in. I've also got a hopper type seed feeder, but I use a shallow dish as well. And then I use two other dishes for the two other types of seed that I put in there, a tonic seed and just a plain red millet seed in the other one. Those are down there, and then occasionally twice a week they will get either soft food or just some mixed vegetables. So that's the feeding dishes at the bottom. Oh sorry, there is also a tray there of grit, with a mixture of grit and charcoal that I put in there. Those of you that have been watching the channel for a while will know that for a time I did separate the cocks and the hens. I didn't find that helped particularly in terms of getting them breeding, and it just meant I was taking up more space by separating them out. So they're now, both the cocks and the hens are just share the main flight. You do find that, you know, cocks and hens will pair up in there, and you know, as always, cockbirds will pair up with other cockbirds in there. However, once I've taken them out of there and put them in the breeding cage, those pair bonds are very quickly split, and the new pair, the pair that I want to breed with, I find does settle down quite quickly in the breeding cage. So that then is the main flight. Let's have a quick look at the nursery flight. So let's have a quick look at the nursery or nappy flight. I know I use the word interchangeable a little bit, which also runs along the rest of the back wall of the main shed. And this one is, it's about 1 metre in total length by about 1.25 metres high. So it's half flight really. And then it's about another half a metre, no, about half a metre in depth. So the same depth as the main flight. It has step type perches at one end and then just some other perches at the other end, so there's no real flying distance in between, but they do have, you know, again I feed on the bottom bit of it, so they do have to fly up to get to the perches, which does give the young birds that initial exercise and gets their wings stretched as they fly from one end to the other end, from the seed and feeders up. In the nursery flight, I continue to use the Flowmatic type drinkers. These are the ones that they would have been used to in the breeding cages, so they should know that there's water, that's where they get their water from. And in terms of feeding, I feed from again from shallow dishes on the floor of the cage, and in here I feed a straight, you know, budgie mix in a shallow dish. I then feed a tonic seed in a small dish, and they also continue to get soft food whilst they're in the nursery flight because that's what they would have been used to in the breeding cages. So I continue to give them that every day. I also place in there some millet sprays in there, the same way as I would have put them into the breeding cages, but just find it that they take to them quite quickly, or they got used to them in the breeding cages, so they continue to have it in there while they begin to take to just the normal seed, not on the millet sprays. It gives them that in between bit, so weaning them off the millet sprays and onto the main seed. So that's the nursery flight. How long do I leave the birds in the nursery flight? I normally like to leave them in there until they've completed their initial molt, so when they've moved from being bar heads, so they've lost that, the bars on the top of the head, that first initial molt. Once they've done that, I will then move them into the main flight. I will try to move them from the nursery flight into the main flight in batches of 3 or 4, but it does really depend on how many I've got, how many I've bred. So, but I do, I wouldn't want to just move a single bird into there, so I'd hold one back, or I'd bring one a little bit forward to move, so I can move more than one bird from the nursery flight into the main flight. So that really is the two main flights in the shed. Like I say, let's have a quick look at the breeding cage setup. So that brings us on to the breeding cages that we've got set up in the Budgerigar shed, and the main bank of breeding cages run across the back wall of the shed, and these are all wire cages, and there's actually a bank of 6, so 3 on the top and 3 on the row below. So each of the breeding cages are about 59 centimetres long by 42 centimetres high by 40 centimetres in depth, and I attach, as you can see, the nest box to the outside of the breeding cages on these ones. Below the banks of breeding cages there's a bit of storage area. I mainly at the moment use this for keeping some old breeding cages and some supplements, and the some smaller bags of seed that I keep down there. So that's that bank of breeding cages. So the second batch of breeding cages that I've got run along the I suppose the area of the shed that's closest to the garage door, and I've got a bank of 4 breeding cages, so they're all joined together, and they are all wooden breeding cages with internal nest boxes. So each of those breeding cages, including the internal nest box, is around about 70 centimetres by 50 centimetres by 40 centimetres. So as you can see, they're a bit bigger than the wire breeding cages. Having used these now for just my first season of using those wooden breeding cages, and my early thoughts are that I probably won't use those again for breeding, just because they are difficult to keep clean in my view. That's my own personal experience of them. I will keep them though, and I think I will use them as stock cages for the budgerigars, and also some place to keep the show team in there, and maybe if I'm splitting pairs up, that sort of thing. So that's my thought on those, which means I probably will need to get some additional wire breeding cages. I'll probably just get another bank of 3 or possibly a bank of 4. I don't know yet. I'm just still thinking about that and where I would put those. So those are the 2 banks of breeding cages that I have in the Budgerigar shed. And the final cages that I've got in here is a small stock cage that I normally use for either for the breeding team, or when I'm about to pair up I might put cockbirds in there, or alternatively I use it at this time of the year really for putting cockbirds when I've split a pair up, and you'll see that I've got one of the cockbirds that I've literally just split in there at the moment. I like to give birds a little bit of a rest before they go back into the main flight after they've been in the breeding cages. Just my own personal preference. And that stock cage is 96 centimetres long by 38 centimetres high by 30 centimetres deep. It can be split in two, but I don't split it very often. I tend to leave it as one open cage so they can fly from one end to the other and give themselves a little bit of exercise before they go, particularly this time when I'm splitting them, before they go back into the main flight. So that are all of the cages that we have in the Budgerigar shed. The only other thing I suppose I want to talk about is lighting and heating. So in here I do have an electric oil filled heater. This is set to 16 degrees all year round, so in the summer it won't come on, in the winter it's on and off, just keeping this shed above 16. That's really just how the breeding budgerigar, so if it does get really cold outside, they're not struggling in terms of trying to keep chicks and eggs warm. So that's the main reason for setting it at 16. Also makes it a bit more pleasant for me when I'm working in here. So that's the heating. Lighting, I currently have two fluorescent tubes in here. One main fluorescent tube that I suppose lights up the majority of the shed, and then another slightly smaller tube that's used above the flight cages. So those are the two tubes that I've got. I'm currently considering that I probably need another main long fluorescent tube in here, particularly if I'm going to use the rest of the shed. And I'm beginning to think about getting some of those LED lights to go along the breeding cages, but I'm still thinking about how that might look. And I'll probably, if I'm going to do that, I will do that once I've split up all the pairs and do it over the summer break. So really that is the budgerigar shed. Let's take a look now, pop outside, and we'll go and have a look at the Finch and Fife shed. So here we are back out in the cold, so out in the Finch and Fife shed. Got a hot drink, so hopefully I'll stay a bit warm while I'm filming this. So this particular shed used to be was my very first shed, and I built it myself, and it was originally intended to house my budgerigars. So it's 2 metres by 2 metres by 2 metres, so quite a small shed. When I first bought the budgies, I only had a couple of pairs, so it certainly sufficed for them. So like I say, so 2 metres square. It is wooden construction. There is some insulation in it, but not masses, and then I've covered it with a white hardboard, I suppose, between the outside, the insulation, and the inside. So there is a little bit of insulation, not a massive amount, as I say. It has got 3 windows, and there are 2 on near the main flight and 1 on the far side. The actual setup itself is along one end, so running the full length of one side is a fairly large flight. It's a full length flight, so in effect it is 2 metres long by about 2 metres high and just under a metre in depth. And that has the standard perches, same as before. It's got the step type perches at either end, giving plenty of flying room for the finches and the fifes at the moment. Again, on the base of the shed, I use the gold chip bedding, and I feed again at the bottom of the flight in between the 2 sets of perches. I feed currently in here. I'm feeding a mixed finch seed. That is the one that goes down the most, as you might imagine. I've got more finches than I have canaries. Sorry, I was just distracted there. The cockbird is beaking with the hen at the moment, so it looks like he's trying to feed the hen. He has been singing a little bit more lately. If I can get some pictures of this, I will do in a bit. But the hen certainly looks like she wants feeding at the moment. Yeah, like I say, I feed at the bottom. Again, I feed from 2 jam jar feeders. So one contains the Finch mix, the other contains a plain canary mix. I also feed on the bottom twice a week at the moment, just a simple, or my standard soft food. There is always in the bottom of the cage a small dish containing water for the bathing. Canaries bathing it every morning, so that goes in first thing in the morning. So that's the main flight. The other thing on here, drinkers, phlegmatic type drinkers, I have 2 of them, and then there is a dish containing grit and charcoal as within the budgerigars. So that's the main flight. I then have, or will have, 2 breeding cages in here for the canaries. Top one for them to breed, for the pair that I've got to breed in, and then the bottom one will be for any offspring. I also intend to have running along the back of the shed or some additional breeding cages along there for either for breeding some more fife canaries in the future, or certainly this year, if I can pick up some gold press at Stafford at a reasonable price, then I will put a couple of gold press in there and see if I can get those to breed successfully for me. So that's the breeding cages. In terms of heating and lighting in here, so when I had this built, I got an electrician to come in and fit some electrics running from the house into here. So there are electrics in here, and they run basically at the moment a single light in here, so a simple light, and then also 2 sets of heaters. I have a tubular electric tube heater that's on the bottom near the main flight, and then on the far side I have a smaller than the one in the shed, but a smaller oil-filled electric heater in there as well. It's set in here to just to 10 degrees, so they're not on all the time. At the moment, again, the weather's turned quite chilly again, so at the moment they're on a bit more, but most of the time I come in here, the heaters aren't even on. And at the moment actually it's showing that it's already at 10, so they're off. So that's the 2 heaters and the electrics in here. Like down in the main shed, I also have in here a radio set to classic FM, so it's the same in both the flights or both the sheds. And again, that's just because it's, you know, I got an old two rather old, very cheap radios, wireless is in here, and that's about the only station I can get that's reasonable music wise from my point of view. So that's what's in this particular shed, and I hope you enjoyed that quick roundup of the my 2 sheds and what they look like. This particular shed, this is in need of a good going over and you know, some general repairs and maintenance in here that I will almost certainly do once the fifes are finished breeding in the summer. The weather's a bit nicer. I need to do some work just generally. It's looking its age, you know, it is almost, I suppose, 12 years old now, and whilst it's had a number of little running repairs, it's in need of just generally a good clean out and some real good maintenance in here. So that's a job for the summer. Maybe we'll look at that in a video in the, you know, September, October time, or August, September, October time. So that's the 2 main sheds. Well, I do hope you did enjoy this episode looking at the 2 sheds, a shed tour I suppose, or the sheds tour. But that is all we got time for in this video. We'll finish the video at the end with some look at the birds that are going out to the show. I won't talk about them, there'll just be some pictures of them. So as I say, that's all we got time for in this episode. In the next episode, we've got a full breeding update coming from the Budgerigar shed. I have posted some pictures on Facebook just recently of some of the latest chicks that have hatched, but it will be a full roundup, a full breeding roundup of the Budgerigars, and there will also be, touch wood, if I can find time in between my show secretary duties at the Oxford 1910 Stock Show, I hope to get some video of the birds there. We'll have a look at the winning Budgerigars and the winning fifes, and I think there's going to be some borders there, so we'll have a look at the borders as well. And from memory, there are quite a few British, a fair few foreign, and a number of other variety canaries, so we will also have a look at those, and if I can, I will get the judges to talk about the winning birds if they're willing to do that. So that's for the next episode though. Until then, as always, do stay safe and enjoy your birds.